जय श्री श्री राधा गोकुलानंद भगवान की जय। श्री श्री सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान जी की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। So we will have an aarti now. It's 7 o'clock. We'll be reading from this aarti up here. We request everybody to please stand, those who are able to. Thank you. की बजया जय गौरा चांदे आरती को शोभा। की बजया जय गौरा चांदे आरती को शोभा। जानवी तटवने जगमन लोभा। जानवी तटवने जगमन दक्षिण निताई जान बामे गदाधर दक्षिण निताई जान बामे गदाधर। निकटे अद्वैत श्रीनिवास छत्रधार। निकटे वास छत्रधार बसिया छे गौराचान रत्न सिंहासने बसिया छे गौराचान रत्न सिंहासने। आरती कोरे न ब्रह्मा आदिदेव गाने। आरती कोरे ब्रह्मा आदिदेव नर हरि आदि कोरी चामर दुलाय। नर हरि आदि कोरी चामर दुलाय। संजय मुकुंद वासु घोष आदि गाय। संजय मुकुंद घोष आदि गाय। शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे बाजे करताल। शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे बाजे करताल। मधुर मृदंग बाजे परम रसाल। मधुर मृदंग बाजे परम रसाल। शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे माधुर 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 बाजे। जे घंटा बाजे माधुर माधुर शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे माधुर 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 बाजे। माधुर 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 बाजे। शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे बाजे, मधुर 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 बाजे। निताय गौर हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, निताय गौर हरि बोल। बहु कोटि चंद्र जिनी वदन उज्ज्वल, बहु कोटि जिनी वदन उज्ज्वल, बहु कोटि चंद्र जिनी वदन उज्ज्वल, बहु कोटि चंद्र जिनी वदन उज्ज्वल। गाल देशे पान माला, कोरि जलमाला, गाल देशे पान माला, कोरि जलमाला। शिव सुख नारद, प्रेमे गद गद, शिव सुख नारद, प्रेमे गद गद। भक्ति विनोद देखे गोरर संपद, भक्ति विनोद देखे गौरंगे आरती शोभा, जग जान मान लोभा। गौरंगे आरती शोभा, जग जान मान लोभा। जग जन मन लोभा, जग जन मन लोभा, मन लोभा जग जन। निताय गौर हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, निताय गौर हरि बोल। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले, श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने। नमो विष्णुपदाय वेदांत स्वामी इति नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे, निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे, निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेश। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha Gokulananda Radha Jaya Jai Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Gaurang Nitai, Jaya Gaurang Nitai, Gaurang Nitai, Jaya Gaurang Nitai, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, जय श्री श्री राधा गोकुलानंद भगवान की जय। श्री श्री सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान जी की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। So we'll be singing Narsinga Aarti for 5 minutes. Everybody can sit down, please. Namaste Narsinghaya. Namaste Prahlad Lad Daine. हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः हिरण्यकशिपु शीलताङ्कानखालाय हितो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहा हितो नरसिंहा नरसिंहा यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा बाहे नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा बाहे नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरे नाखाम् अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलिता हिरण्यकश्यपु तनुभृंगा केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव कर कमलवरे काम अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृंगां केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव श्री श्री नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय। भक्तराज प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। दाई गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि।
Krishna, everyone. Thank you for coming for Gora Aarti. There's Mahaprasadam now being served outside, and shortly we'll have Bhagavad Gita class in the temple room.
So I'm not allowed to stay in here? That's how long.
These mats or what? That's okay. I'll just put my laptop just in case. That's perfectly. It's 7:14, wasn't it? The only thing is I printed it so it's like that. You just have to turn it like that.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I did go through a lot of pages. I just wrote everything down. Will you stay, do you think? Or?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I think I've got my own actually, but I don't play very well. Do you want to play them for me? Okay. Are you okay to stay? Are you going to stay? Yeah. Would it be alright to get a glass of water, honey? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, darling.
I need to make sure the microphone's loud enough because people are going to complain can't hear.
That suits me fine. Testing. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think it's working.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we'll start with Jaya Radha Madhava. I'm not a very good singer, so I'm relying on my friend Abby to help. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to speak a little something on verse 7:14 of the Bhagavad Gita today. I ask your blessings so I can speak on this wonderful verse for my own purification. So the verse is the 14th verse of chapter 7, and I'm going to start by saying the verse. Devi hi esha gunamai, mama maya duratyaya, mameva ye prapadyante, maya metam tarantite. Once again, Devi he esha gunamai, mama maya duratyaya, mameva ye prapadyante, maya metam tarantite. I'll now do the word-for-word translation. Please repeat after me. Devi, transcendental. He, certainly. Isha, this. Gunamai, consisting of the three modes of material nature. Mama, my. Maya, energy. Duratyaya, very difficult to overcome. Mam, unto me. Eva, certainly. Ye, those who. Prapadyante, surrender. Mayamitam, this illusory energy. Taranti, overcome. De, they. So I'm going to read the translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So I'm going to say the translation again, section by section, if you want to repeat after me. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. I will now read the purport by Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable energies, and all these energies are divine. Although the living entities are part of his energies and are therefore divine, due to contact with material energy, their original superior power is covered. Being thus covered by material energy, one cannot possibly overcome its influence. As previously stated, both the material and spiritual natures, being emanations from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are eternal. The living entities belong to the eternal superior nature of the Lord, but due to contamination by the inferior nature, matter, their illusion is also eternal. The conditioned soul is therefore called Nityabadha, or eternally conditioned. No one can trace out the history of his becoming conditioned at a certain date in material history. Consequently, his release from the clutches of material nature is very difficult, even though that material nature is an inferior energy, because material energy is ultimately conducted by the supreme will, which the living entity cannot overcome. Inferior material nature is defined herein as divine nature, due to its divine connection and movement by the divine will. Being conducted by divine will, material nature, although inferior, acts so wonderfully in the construction and destruction of the cosmic manifestation. The Vedas confirm this as follows: Mayam tu prakritam vidyan mayanam tu maheshwaram. Although Maya, or illusion, is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the personality of Godhead, who is Maheshvara, the supreme controller. Svetashvardhara Upanishad 4:10. Another meaning of guna is rope. It is to be understood that the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. A man bound by the hands and feet cannot free himself. He must be helped by a person who is unbound. Because the bound cannot help the bound, the rescuer must be liberated. Therefore, only Lord Krishna, or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, can release the conditioned soul. Without such superior help, one cannot be freed from the bondage of material nature. Devotional service or Krishna consciousness can help one gain such release. Krishna, being the Lord of the illusory energy, can order this insurmountable energy to release the conditioned soul. He orders this release out of his causeless mercy on the surrendered soul and out of his paternal affection for the living entity, who is originally a beloved son of the Lord. Therefore, surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is the only means to get free from the clutches of the stringent material nature. The words Mam Eva are also significant. Mam means unto Krishna, Vishnu, only, and not Brahma or Shiva. Although Brahma and Shiva are greatly elevated and are almost on the level of Vishnu, it is not possible for such incarnations of Rajaguna, passion, and Tamoguna, ignorance, to release the conditioned soul from the clutches of Maya. In other words, both Brahma and Shiva are also under the influence of Maya. Only Vishnu is the master of Maya. Therefore, he alone can give release to the conditioned soul. The Vedas, Svetashvatara Upanishad 3:8, confirm this in the phrase Dhameva Viditva, or freedom is possible only by understanding Krishna. Even Lord Shiva affirms that liberation can be achieved only by the mercy of Vishnu. Lord Shiva says, Mukti Pradata Sarvisham Vishnur Eva Na Samshaya. There is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone. So.
I got a question.
Yes, please.
Why Shiva couldn't, he's saying that Shiva got like three modes and he's the more ignorant, so
Yes, that's right, Tamakuni.
Shiva couldn't elevate himself to go to mode of, what's the three modes?
Goodness, you mean? Why he couldn't elevate himself?
Why is still in mode of ignorance?
That's a very good question. Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are almost on the same level as Lord Vishnu, but I think they have their eternal roles. Lord Vishnu is the mode of goodness, and Lord Brahma is the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva is the mode of ignorance, because their roles are such that they are responsible for the creation, the maintenance, and the destruction.
I think that's right. Yeah. Probably they are doing their duty. In order to do their duty, they have to be in the specific mode.
Exactly. But it says here they are highly elevated souls. They are greatly elevated and are almost on the level of Vishnu. So, kind of they're not just like the Jivas.
But in another way, if all three modes together, it's a complete kind of universe, right? Without all three, even though it's a mode of goodness, can't exist without mode of ignorance and mode of passion. So if all three exist together, then it's a meaningful. That's a kind of statue we have. I think there's a name, a specific name. The Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, they all three together.
Yes.
I think that's what a specific name.
Yes. I mean, we'll talk about this later in the class, but the modes of material nature are material. And, the idea is not to stay in ignorance or passion or even goodness. And I talk about that a little bit later. So, yes, we can have that discussion then. It's to transcend even the mode of goodness, to get onto the transcendental platform and get into our natural constitutional position as the servant of Krishna. But it's a good question. Thank you for asking. So I'm just going to do the Mangalacharan prayers. Let's get into the right bit. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Yasmitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'm going to start by unpacking the verse itself, and then we'll move on to looking at some of the elements in the purport. Prabhupada shares with us a lot of information about the core tenets of Bhakti Yoga in this verse, and I'll attempt to present this. So it's a very important verse because it gives us the key to end our suffering. And you might think, why are we suffering? Does anyone have an idea of why are we suffering, or are we even suffering? Do we think we're suffering? No. Well, the clue appears in the verse itself, namely Gunamai, Devi Hiesha Gunamai. And Gunamai refers to the three modes of material nature, which Krishna describes as being very difficult to overcome. So we're looking at verse 14, and in the previous verse of the 7th chapter, verse 13th, Krishna cites that the covering of the three modes of material nature, namely goodness and passion and ignorance, prevents the living entity from understanding him. Deluded by the three modes, the whole world does not know me. So the three modes, otherwise known as material energy, prevents us from understanding God. Instead, we're deluded into suffering in this world. And in this verse, verse 14, Krishna is saying that even though the living entity is covered by material energy, this material energy is actually part of him. It's not spiritual, it's material, but it's part of his innumerable energies. He refers to it as Mama Maya, or my Maya. And how do we get captured by Maya, or Krishna's inferior energy, which leads us to even forget him? Does anyone have any ideas of how Maya can capture us? I'd like to venture
Hare
an
Krishna.
answer. Hare Krishna.
Maya's very attractive. We don't even realize we're being pulled in by her usually. Yeah.
Absolutely, she is very attractive, and we don't even know that, she's pulling us in. Because what happens is the living entity forgets his real position, and his real position is the servant of Krishna. And instead, he might want to enjoy himself by sense gratification, or he might want to be the controller. So he might want to lord it over the material energy and use it for his own purposes. And in that instance, he is immediately captured by Maya. And I was reading an article by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, who describes the link between Maya and the three modes of material nature.
So that means the Maya is more powerful than Krishna, right?
No, Maya is not more powerful than Krishna.
So
But
take put a metal and put a two magnet.
Just for people online.
yes.
I'm just saying, okay, you put a metal
Yes.
in the middle and you put a one magnet one side and put another magnet another side, and you see which the metal might pull into one direction, whichever the magnetic force is powerful. So it looks like we are saying without a Krishna conscious, if you got like a kind of a neutral conscious, then the Maya will actually pull it. Only way to escape from Maya, then you have to be a Krishna consciousness. So that means without a Krishna consciousness, the Maya consciousness is very powerful. So that means the Maya is more powerful than the Krishna, unless you have to keep practicing, because otherwise we don't keep practicing Maya without the Maya is pulling us towards.
I like your image of the two magnets, and one is Maya and one is Krishna, and they're both having a fight and pulling us towards them. It's not quite the case. So I'm just going to finish explaining kind of how Maya is linked into material energy and what role she plays, because I cover this. But kind of Maya, and you've got the three modes of material nature and the mind, and they kind of form a hierarchy in the chain of command. So I don't know whether you've seen the picture of these three ladies, and they're holding these ropes, and they've got kind of people on the end of these ropes dancing as puppets on a string. These three ladies are the modes of material nature: goodness and passion and ignorance. And Maya Devi acts through these females on our mind, and this leads us to falsely identify with our bodies. So she does capture us, you're right. We become attached to bodily designations and we think, that everything is mine. We think that I'm a man, I'm a woman, and that I'm from this country, and I'm from this culture, I'm intelligent, I'm old, I'm young, and so on and on. We get captured by these material designations, which are not actually part of us. They are external to our existence. They're just a dress we wear. So, in the purport, this energy, the material energy of Maya, is actually described as divine, which goes back to your question, Prabhu. Devi hiya shagunamayi, this divine energy of mine. But can we say that Maya is really divine? Is it just the magnet, the opposite of Krishna? Because Maya is an energy that deludes us, that puts us in illusion, that, allows us to be overcome by bad habits, lust, anger, greed, and we need to be turning away from Maya, don't we? So how can we say that Maya is divine? So the way that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu described it in his article, I really liked, and I'll share with you. So he explains it's just like taking a multiple choice test. So the teacher provides all the options. If you've got 4 options, there are 3 wrong answers and 1 right answer. And, the right answer is given there, but if the student hasn't studied, if they haven't paid attention in class, then they're not going to know what the right answer is, and they will pick the wrong one. And so this is kind of similar to Maya, and she can give us a lot of wrong paths when we are tested. And if we didn't pay enough attention to Guru or Sadhu or Shastra, if we didn't, prepare adequately for our test with robust sadhana, the practice of hearing and chanting, and we pick the wrong path, it's no good blaming Maya, just like you can't blame your teacher if you pick the wrong answer on the test. And because we do have some independence, and we do have some free will to make the right choices with which to perfect our lives. So we can say Maya is Krishna's divine energy, because her energy is a positive energy, even if she brings us all those illusory options. And we can, use her energy productively. We can turn away from them and choose the correct option instead, which is, as it says in the verse, surrendering to Krishna. Those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So instead of Maya being on the same level as Krishna, she is actually Krishna's servant, because, she's following his orders. So here in the purport it says, inferior material nature, which is governed by Maya, is defined herein as divine nature due to its divine connection of movements by the divine will. So actually the divine will is controlling material nature. So she's actually Krishna's servant. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 86, verse 45, Maya is said to delude the conditioned souls into accepting as real her temporary, insubstantial manifestations as her service to the Lord. And because, we're deluded into accepting the temporary, the unreal, we identify with our body. We identify with our bodily needs. We identify with our familial relationships. We identify with our relationships in society. We identify with our mind's desires. But if we're determined to get to Krishna and serve him, then he will help us to overcome Maya Devi's illusory process. But the fact that, she is even here and, giving us illusory options, it's part of the supreme will, as it says in the purport. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, in a way, yes.
I tried my best.
See, the reason, one of the reasons we get caught in the mind is
Yes.
we got so we got 5 senses.
Yes.
The 5 senses is interacting with the world. So the five senses are connected to a mind. So the mind is actually pulling by those five senses. So
Yes.
the mind is actually
Yes, you're right. Yes.
mind is actually in between five senses, and our true nature is our soul.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
if our five senses is really activated, then the mind is moving towards the five senses.
Absolutely.
But if we activate our soul, which is like a coming and Krishna consciousness or praying God, the mind actually pulling towards inside more. So
Absolutely.
it's going away from the five senses. So it is just like it's a two extreme, five senses and the soul. The mind is actually oscillating between the two extreme. So
Yes, actually, it's said that our minds can be our greatest friend or our greatest enemy.
greatest enemy. So
Yes.
so if we try to be a Krishna conscious, so the mind comes closer to the God. So then we could be away from the Maya. So that's what I could see it.
Exactly. But the fact that she's, the mind is captured by illusion is part of the supreme will, because, if we want to forget Krishna, then he will supply us with the facility to do so via his servant Maya Devi. It's quite a thankless task for Maya Devi to take this position and, delude the living entities, but it is part of his will that she do so if we want to be deluded. But thank you so much for your comments, it's really interesting. So in the verse, Krishna is telling us that the divine energy is very, very difficult to overcome. Mama Maya Duratyaya. Maya is very strong. And when she provides the wrong options, she can make us think they are the right options and that we're doing the right thing. And that's the energy of illusion. And Srila Prabhupada says in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 7, verse 114, Maya has two potencies with which to execute her two functions, the Brakshibatmika Shakti, the power to throw the living entity into the ocean of material existence, and Avaranatmika Shakti, the power to cover the knowledge of the living entity. Avaranatmika makes us forget, and Brakshibatmika makes us think what is desirable for me. And she does this because Krishna wants to make sure that only those who use their free will properly can actually get to the spiritual world. So we cannot come to the spiritual world unless we have a mentality of service, unless we realize our actual position as a servitor of the Lord. And if our tendency to control and enjoy overrides our natural inclination to serve, then we might not get entry to the spiritual world, which is our destination. So the filter is Maya Devi. She's ensuring that only those who can surrender to Krishna can overcome her illusory energy, and with the Lord's sanction, gain the highest treasure imaginable, sort of that of unmitigated, uninterrupted service to the Lord in his abode. So if our purpose is strong, and if we're determined to serve Krishna, then we won't be overcome by the temptations of Maya Devi. So the question you might be thinking is, how can we make our purpose strong? And the only way this can happen is to surrender to Krishna. Those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it, beyond the three modes of material nature. So, and surrender to Krishna is what Maya actually wants. She wants us to make the right choice on our multiple choice exam. And, she's given us the illusory options, but she's also presenting us with the right answer. So, let's look a little about what surrender means. Does anyone have any ideas about surrender? and what it could mean?
It means like giving up what you thought was true, maybe, or giving up, maybe even who you think you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, I think you're right there, because it means rejecting the actions which take us away from Krishna, as you're saying, and choosing the actions which take us closer to him. So it's a dual purpose there. So we accept what is favourable and reject what is unfavourable. Now, in verse 1866, the Lord says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam praja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashyami ma suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. And if you look in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, you'll find the Gita Mahatmya there, and it describes how we can be freed from the sinful reactions. So Krishna is telling us, I will free you from the sinful reactions. And in the Gita Mahatmya verse 2, we can see how to be freed from the anxieties and miseries that our sinful reactions from, past activities have caused us. And, that there a formula is given. If one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. So it's telling us there to do what? Did anyone pick that up? If one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely and with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him.
It was saying about being serious.
Yeah, about reading the Bhagavad Gita seriously and with sincerity. And if we read it with, serious intentions and, in a sincere mood and in a mood of surrender, and apply the learnings from it, then we're performing the 6 kinds of surrender. And the 6 kinds of surrender are the acceptance of those things favourable to devotional service and rejection of unfavourable things, and the conviction that Krishna will give protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, full self-surrender, and humility. So these are the 6 actions of surrender. So I'll read that again. The acceptance of those things favourable to a devotional service, the rejection of unfavourable things, the conviction that Krishna will give protection, and the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, full self-surrender and humility. So when we read the Bhagavad Gita, as it says, with all seriousness, with sincere intent, we're choosing an action which takes us closer to Krishna. We can also read in the Gita many instances of where Krishna has said he'll give us protection. For example, in 1866, he says he'll deliver us from our sinful reactions. And in verse 528, he says he's our well-wisher, our benefactor. And in this purport, he says, he's our father. And so in this purport it says, he orders this release out of this causeless mercy on the surrendered soul and out of his paternal affection for the living entity who is originally a beloved son of the Lord. And by reading Srila Prabhupada's purports, we can also be on our way to becoming fully self-surrendered and humble, as Srila Prabhupada is, because then we're associating with the mind of a pure devotee, and we can, sort of pick up and aspire on his transcendental qualities. And reading the Gita is also part of Shravanam, which is the first process listed in the 9 processes of devotional services. So does everyone know the 9 processes of devotional service? No? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, and Atma Nivedanam. Yes? And I'll just go through the translations. So these mean hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering him, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship, and offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord's one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto him. So if we can do this, as Krishna says, at the end of the verse, we can easily cross beyond material nature, just as easily as we can cross the material ocean, which has become so small that it's the puddle in a calf's hoof print. Does that make sense? Any questions at all? No? Okay. So we've looked at a few key elements of the verse, and we're going on to some of the tenets in the purport that Srila Prabhupada's commentated on. And earlier we discussed that the inferior energy of Maya is under the control of the Supreme Will and is divine because she's actually carrying out Krishna's will as his servant. And Prabhupada in his purport highlights that as well as being divine, the material energy as well as the spiritual energy is eternal. So it's easy to see why the spiritual energy or the superior energy is eternal. Even though our material bodies don't last, our soul does. And earlier in the Gita, in chapter 2, we looked at the soul in great detail, and we learnt that for the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He's unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He's not slain when the body is slain. And that's verse 20 in chapter 2. So it's not only the spiritual nature that is eternal, but also our material nature is. So our material nature is our conditioned state, and in our conditioned state we think we're the body rather than the soul. But the body dies. So how can material nature be eternal? If the body dies, how can material nature be eternal?
Because there's always souls falling, there's always people that want to turn their backs on Krishna.
Absolutely, exactly the right answer. So Abhi said there's always people who, are turning away from Krishna. There's always, people falling into the condition, the eternal condition. And Prabhupada explains in the purport that we're in eternal illusion. For most of us, it's our illusion that is eternal, even as our material bodies are not. We might take this material body, we might take another material body, then another, but our illusion is eternal. Yes, Prabhu.
Why the souls are coming out of Krishna consciousness?
Why? You mean why are they falling down? Because yes, exactly.
They are falling down.
Absolutely. That's a question I asked as well, especially when I was going through a few miseries, is why exactly did we leave Krishna? And, kind of the answer that I've heard that makes most sense to me is that, we became envious of Krishna. I think we wanted to be the controllers. We wanted to be the enjoyers. We didn't just want to serve. We wanted to enjoy and control. And, as soon as you have those thoughts, you're in the material energy, and it's a fall down into the material world. And we might stay here for billions of lifetimes in our eternal cycle.
So why do you decide like that at the time? So you are with Krishna, so it's so powerful energy.
Yes.
It's very influencing.
Yes.
But still, the soul decides, I want to come out of that.
Absolutely. Why? Because I want to forget Krishna, exactly. I mean, we do have minute independence. So it's not that, Krishna is going to force us to love him, force us to stay with him. force us to serve him if we don't want to. He will allow us to forget, and he will use Maya Devi, his servant, his very good servant, to do that. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I apologise, maybe I may offer something.
Of course, please do.
My name is Japa Yogi now, so I've been for 30 years. Okay. If I could just tell you the answer that I've heard to
Yes,
this,
please.
that Srila Prabhupada gave. This question of why we left. Srila Prabhupada said, if you're in a burning building, the whole thing's burning down. You don't sit around and ask, why did the fire start? You get about the business of getting out. So Srila Prabhupada's saying, this is the process for getting out of the material world. Take it. Very simple, take it. Otherwise, it's somewhat philosophizing and sort of, there's a place for philosophizing, but on this one, each one of us has been given an opportunity to get out of the process of samsara, to work out why we got here is somewhat avoiding the issue, that we actually need to go about the process of actually taking this Krishna consciousness process and again about the business of getting out. Prabhupada said, take this. This is the process to get out. That's the answer Srila Prabhupada gave on one occasion. That for me that worked just fine.
Yes, thank you so much for offering those very wise comments. And, we've talked about how our illusion is eternal. And the idea, as Prabhu said, is it's necessary to overcome the material energy and relinquish the cycle of birth and death. So Prabhupada, I've got another quote from Prabhupada actually, who said in his lecture in Denver, July 2nd, 1975, this material world is full of danger. It is a dangerous place. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita, Dukhalayam. It is the place of miseries. You cannot become happy in a place which is meant for miseries. That we have to understand. Krishna says, the Supreme Personality, that Dukhalayam asasvatam, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 15. This material world is a place of miserable condition. So if we become the Nitya Bhadda, these eternally conditioned souls, we have to encounter 3 types of miseries in this world. Adibodhika, miseries caused by living entities, not just people, but even entities like ants and mosquitoes, which can cause difficulties. Adhyatmika, miseries caused by the body and mind. And Adidevika, miseries caused by nature, flood, fire, hurricanes, a lot of what the world is experiencing at this moment. So it's absolutely right that the answer is not why did we fall down, but actually how can we go back to Krishna. And Prabhupada describes the Dukhalayam Asasvatam concept. And another point that Srila Prabhupada makes is, why it's so difficult to overcome material nature is, our own position. So originally we were part of his superior energy. The spiritual world, we're part of the spiritual world, and the spiritual world is the manifestation of the Lord's superior energy, also known as his internal potency. Material world is a manifestation of his external potency, and it's known as the inferior energy. And of course, we belong to the Lord's superior energy. But as Prabhupada describes in this purport, due to contact with material nature, our original superior power is covered, and so we're regarded as marginal potency, neither one thing nor the other. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the purport to Canto 2, chapter 5, verse 19, this is nicely described. Because they are between the internal and external potencies, the eternally transcendental living entities are called the marginal potency of the Lord. And factually, the living entities are not meant to be so conditioned by material energy, but due to their being affected by the false lording it over the material energy, they come under the influence of such potency and thus become conditioned by the three modes of material nature. This external energy of the Lord covers up the pure knowledge of the living entities internally existing with him, but the covering is so constant that it appears that the conditioned soul is eternally ignorant. Such is the wonderful action of Maya, or external energy manifested as if materially produced. So because we're covered by this material energy, this means that on our own, we can't actually get out of this cycle of birth and death. You know, as we found out, the conditioned soul is eternally in illusion, and material nature is actually being conducted by divine will, even though it's inferior potency. Of course, we know that we can't overcome the divine energy by ourselves. And then another reason why it's so difficult to overcome material energy is when Prabhupada highlights the dual meaning of guna. So guna refers to the modes of material nature, and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that another meaning of guna is rope. It's to be understood that the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. And in this instance, illusion refers to the idea that we are the doer. We think that we're the doer. You know, we think that we do everything, but in actual fact, it is the three modes of material nature acting upon us. And verse 27 from chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita tells us, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Does that make sense? We think that we're doing everything, but actually we're under the influence of material nature. We're actually being forced by the modes of nature to do everything. So when we're greedy for money, it's not our soul. The soul never laments, it never hankers. You know, Brahma Buddha Prasanatma na shotati na kankshati. But when we're greedy for money, for fame, for affection, for power, it's the mode of passion which is pushing us. And we think, you know, we're deluded. We think it's me that's doing this, and I really want this. And similarly, the mode of delusion causes ignorance. And in the mode of ignorance, we don't necessarily want to get more and more like we do it in the mode of passion, but we like to sleep and, you know, kind of take intoxicants and perhaps even cause, you know, harm to other living beings. So, you know, kind of when we're influenced by the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion, it gets us further entrenched in karma. And it becomes, you know, kind of a vicious circle. It's almost impossible to escape. So, what's the mode of material nature that's left if passion and ignorance doesn't help us? Goodness, yeah. So we have to try and get into the mode of goodness, which is purer than the other modes. And it's illuminating. It frees us from sinful reactions. We don't create quite so much karma. But there is a danger to the mode of goodness. Does anyone know what it is? There's a danger also to the mode of goodness, Abby. Oh, sorry. Yes, it could be ego, yes. And you were going to say?
It's one Bhagavad Gita verse is that you become conditioned by happiness, actually. You become too content.
Absolutely, exactly. Because there is a lot of pleasure. You know, Abby said we become conditioned by the happiness. And there's a lot of pleasure in being, you know, charitable, in being cultured, in being peaceful. You know, we're kind of satisfied we're okay where we are. We get some knowledge, we get some detachments, we get some happiness. And then we don't, strive to reevaluate who we actually are. We get stuck in the mode of goodness, which is also material. And we're still forgetting that we're the soul, eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. And so, it's material. You also have to grow old and, encounter disease. You also have to die, even if you're in the mode of goodness. And the thing is that if you're in the mode of goodness and you're influenced by the other modes, most of us are a mixture, then, you can fall from the mode of goodness. You won't be able to stay there permanently. And, because the tendency is that we go down. It's very difficult to stay at the mode of goodness for long. So you have to come to the transcendental platform. But as we've said, we can't do it on our own strength. And Maya is very stringent. And she can, grab even the most advanced devotees. So because we're tied by the ropes of material nature, we can't free ourselves, and we cannot ask anyone else to free us, because it says here that the bound cannot be untied by the bound. So who is there to help us? Who can help us free ourselves from the modes? Exactly. So it can be only Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, that can release the conditioned soul. And surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is the only means to get free from the clutches of the stringent material nature. And we looked at the 6 divisions of surrender earlier. So Krishna is said to be the supreme magician. He can conjure up the means of liberation for someone who surrenders to him. And the final part of the purport relates to the fact that it is to Krishna only that we can surrender, rather than Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva, as we were discussing earlier, because even though they are highly exalted beings, they are still incarnations of Rajaguna and Tamaguna. So, as Lord Shiva himself said, there is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Any more questions? No?
Right. The whole premise is all based on the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, exactly. Yes, everything's based on the Bhagavad Gita.
But there is that's another question, is that the Bhagavad Gita is really said, or is that kind of mythology?
Bhagavad Gita was said by Krishna to Arjuna 5,000 years ago, so it's actually Krishna's words. Yes. Yes, Bhagavad Gita as it is. So I'd like to thank you for your kind attention this evening and sort of the nice discussions we've had. And that brings our discussion of verse 714 to a close. So Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Hare Krishna.
I'm so impressed.
That's doing all day.
Oh.
I'll get into a model because I don't know how Maya. Is it the same as 3 ways of material nature? Or is it different? So is it? Don't say about research and stuff. I don't have enough knowledge.
It was good actually that he was here and he was bringing out of, makes you really think, oh,
I know.
actually, do I really know what I'm talking about?
Thank you.